got to the point where I didn't recognize my wife. So I took the medicine. Hey y'all, my name is Sareth. Some of you might know me by the nickname Baffy, and I am a diagnosed schizophrenic. My symptoms started when I was a kid, but as far as I'm concerned, my story begins at the time that I was diagnosed, which was when I was 18. My home life was not the best at that time. My mom was very depressed. She didn't want to get out of bed most days. And before that, she's had some sort of damage that I'm only barely have an inkling towards, that made her a pent-up, angry type of person. And I'm not just saying any of this to say she was bad, because she was not. She wasn't. She just had some stuff going on. But she was very religious. She was controlling, possibly some narcissistic signs there. And then you had my dad, who was a bad person. He was abusive and manipulative. And a few years prior, he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And I want to reiterate that the schizophrenia is not what made him a bad person. He was already that way. But when the schizophrenia developed in his brain, it made him worse. His paranoia was off the charts, and with being an angry, violent person, being paranoid on top of it is just a recipe for disaster. I had been seeing this girl. My mom knew I was seeing her, but my mom did not know how often and how much I was sneaking around to see her, because, like I said, she was controlling. She really didn't want me having much of a life outside of the home. So when she found out, we had a fight. She called my dad over, which I still think is a really crappy move, even though I'm sure it was done because she was scared of what he would do if he wasn't told. This led to me leaving home, which led to him doing insane things like putting explosives in my girlfriend's grandmother's car to try and get them in trouble. Him and my mom went to court trying to file for taking my rights away on basis of insanity, and he had been stalking us around town. Now I'm going to take a moment to clarify something. A lot of people at this point in my story are like, are you sure all those things happened if you're schizophrenic yourself? And yes, I am sure. I have my wife, friends, her family, my family, cops, other third parties, all to corroborate what was real and what isn't. So this is the real story. So at that point, me and my girlfriend was like, we can't stay in this town anymore. It's dangerous. We have to leave. And we went across state and eloped. We were staying with her mother at first until we could get on our feet. And she had already suggested very gently to me that maybe I should find a therapist because it might benefit me. And I was like, nah, it's fine. I'm fine. They're the ones that have the issues, right? And she was like, okay. Well, once we got up there, away from all of the very craziness, I still couldn't sleep. So let me dip back into that childhood I mentioned. The deal with my sleep started around the age of 12, which is also the time I first remember hallucinating. I had chronic sleep paralysis. I experienced it most nights at that point. I had what is apparently called nightmare disorder, where all of my dreams were nightmares and I had them frequently. And this had been my whole life. my whole life had been like that. It was just at 12 where it really got bad. What I now know is hallucinated demons and monsters and things in my closet and under my bed and so on. And so all of that led me to develop somnophobia, where I was literally terrified to go to sleep. I would hurt myself, I would starve myself, I would do anything and everything to keep myself awake at night. That first hallucination, I remember I was at my grandparents' house spending the night, and everyone was asleep. I was in the guest bed. It had one of those floor-length windows in there, and I crawled out of bed when it felt like I was about to actually start falling asleep, and I put my face against the window. And I remember that because it was winter and it was ice cold, and that was one of the things that I used to help me stay awake, is like temperature extremes. While I was sitting there, demons started appearing outside, and every time I blinked, more would appear. They were just standing there and staring at me, and I didn't know what was going on. As I mentioned, my mom was very religious. I was raised in a religious environment. So I thought that I was actually seeing demons and that they were coming to take me to hell. And so I was trying to keep my eyes wide, but I kept blinking and they kept appearing. They started talking to me. They weren't moving, but I could hear their voices, and they were wanting me to come outside. And it terrified me. It wouldn't have been so bad if I could have told someone, but I didn't have anyone. I had tried to tell my mom things that I was experiencing, both in the regards of my mental health and being abused by people. And it was always that I was taking up her time, that I was annoying her, or her outright saying, "Stop acting crazy," or "I'm gonna have you locked up." So I had no one to talk to figure out what was going on. And 12 was also the time, 12, 13 was also the time I realized that imaginary friends weren't supposed to be seen, like, at all. They're supposed to be all in your head. Because I was still seeing mine. And so that was another thing I kind of kept to myself. And for the next several years, until I was 18, I bottled up all of these things, and I couldn't analyze them. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I couldn't talk to anyone. And so that's what led to the eventual psychotic episode when I was 18 that led to me being diagnosed. Like I said, my wife had already suggested it, but then after we moved, she would wake up and realize that I wasn't in the bed, and she'd come and I'd be in the kitchen and sitting in a chair staring out the window, and I'd tell her things like, "He's out there, I can see him, he's coming to get me, I have to make sure he doesn't come inside," things like that. And I was talking about my dad because how psychotic he was and the things he had done. He was a scary guy. I was afraid that he was going to come after us And she would try so hard to use logic and try to reason with me, but that just doesn't work. She suggested again that I talk to someone, and I was like, okay, but I'm not going to take any medicine. I was afraid that people would use the medicine to manipulate me, or to take away my psychic gifts of seeing ghosts and demons and whatnot. So I saw a psychiatrist, and they were like, you have schizophrenia, and you have these sleep disorders, and you have, what they say, general anxiety disorder, something like that. And they're like, and you have some sort of mood disorder going on. And I'm like, okay. And so for the next 4 years, until I was 22, I refused to take medicine. I kind of dealt with the ups and downs, but it got to a point where I was very agoraphobic. I was scared to leave home. I was scared to be around anyone. I was hearing voices all the time. I was seeing things sometimes. And I got to the point where I didn't recognize my wife. I mean, I knew it looked like her and sounded like her, and why would anyone else be in my home but her? But I was convinced it wasn't her. I was convinced that she was some sort of imposter, that my dad or even my mom or other family had hired her to pretend to be my wife in order to manipulate me back into going home to my family, or eventually hurting me or killing me as a revenge or something. And it hurt, because as much as I tried to tell myself, that's her, you know? I couldn't stop feeling like it wasn't. So I took the medicine. And everything, for the first time in pretty much my entire life, everything was quiet. It was still. My anxiety was still there, but it didn't feel overwhelming. My paranoia, the thoughts were there, but my belief in them was not. I could look at my wife and know it was her. Sorry. So I kept taking the medicine. I kept taking it, and eventually it would stop working. And I'd have to try something else. I was allergic to that, and I'd have to try something else. That one didn't work, and I'd have to try something else. And during all this, my symptoms would ebb and flow, and they'd sometimes be horrible, sometimes it'd be things I hadn't experienced before, and it was just something I had to deal with. And eventually I was on like 4 or 5 medications, and I had an issue getting them filled. There had been a change in management at the facility I was receiving care at, a change in the rules about canceling an appointment ahead of time, of which I was not made aware. And so I was booted from the system for canceling an appointment too late. And I had to go cold turkey off of all of those medicines. And I ended up in the psychiatric ward because I couldn't hear people. The voices were so loud and they were constant. The paranoia was constant. I felt like I was on the verge of a heart attack all the time because of the anxiety. So I went in there and I got on the medicines they wanted me on, and they set me up with seeing a new therapist and psychiatrist once I got out. And when I got out, I did go and see them. And I was, I was 25, 26 at the time. So it had only been a few years after I started taking medicines in the first place. When I did see them, they changed my diagnosis. They changed it to schizoaffective disorder, which is basically schizophrenia and a mood disorder combined. They also diagnosed me with PTSD, which they said is where the sleep disorders and the anxiety largely came from. I was so tired of up and down, back and forth, and things only working for a short period, things never getting actually better, that I was so done. I was suicidal. I was like, I am going to do everything. I don't even care if it ends up being some sort of manipulation. I'm going to do everything they tell me to do. And I did. And even the stupid stuff that I still think sounds pretty stupid, I tried. I'm 32 now, so it's been a good 7 years. And I am happy. I feel so much better. I worked so hard getting over my trauma that the PTSD came from, and once the PTSD started getting better, my schizophrenia wasn't as bad to deal with. The medicines for schizophrenia are still working after several years, and I am healthy. I will never be free of schizophrenia. It's not something that you can cure, not at this point in time. But I am healthy and I am happy, and I don't feel alone or overwhelmed or powerless like I did before. I feel like I can experience life now without being scared. I still hear things, I still see things from time to time, but it's not like it was before. So that's what this channel is going to be about, my experience with and my knowledge of schizophrenia. I'll also touch on the PTSD and other things like that. Please ask any questions that you want, suggest videos, like, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I will talk to you later.